Carter had enough wealth to purchase silence, comfort, and immediate respect from anyone who crossed his path in the affluent town of Greenwich, Connecticut. But on that crisp morning, Carter was about to discover that no amount of fortune could buy back the brilliant spark he had unknowingly extinguished inside his very own home. The sprawling estate was still blanketed in slumber when the heavy black town car glided to a halt in front of the wrought iron gates. The time was exactly 7:36 in the morning, a schedule he kept with ruthless precision. Arthur, his loyal and discreet chauffeur, barely had the opportunity to step out and open the passenger side. Carter pushed the heavy door open himself, his sleek silver phone already permanently glued to his ear. He barked orders about corporate mergers, aggressive investors, and stock portfolios, as if the rotation of the entire Earth depended solely on the next command that leapt from his tongue. He demanded that the 10 o'clock morning meeting be firmly confirmed, warned the legal department that he would tolerate absolutely zero delays, and insisted all financial reports be placed on his mahogany desk before the stroke of noon. He marched through the grand marble foyer without noticing the fresh scent of lilies, entirely deaf to the soft, rhythmic tapping of little shoes. Sophie was slowly descending the sweeping grand staircase, wearing a bright yellow ribbon, carefully tied in her hair. In her small hands, she delicately held a colorful drawing crafted with bright wax crayons. She had spent the entire morning illustrating a massive, radiant sun, a sturdy house filled with wide windows, and 3 stick figures holding hands beneath the sky. "Daddy, look what I made for you today." The little girl announced, her voice brimming with innocent hope. Carter only turned a fraction of his face toward her direction. His sharp, calculating eyes remained fiercely locked onto the glowing screen of his expensive smartphone. "Not right now, Princess." He dismissed her with a wave of his hand. "Daddy is right in the middle of sorting out something incredibly important for the company." Sophie immediately froze on the very last step of the grand staircase. The bright, enthusiastic smile on her delicate face diminished, slowly fading out, exactly like a warm candle, completely extinguished by a harsh winter draft. Carter briskly stepped into his massive home office and firmly shut the heavy oak door before she could even utter a single word about why that specific crayon drawing meant so much to her. The little girl remained completely still, silently staring at the dark, polished wood, desperately hoping the door would swing open just one more time. It remained firmly shut. Betty, the elderly housekeeper, emerged from the spacious kitchen, quietly wiping her damp hands on a faded floral apron. She had witnessed this exact scene unfold countless times before, and every single occurrence broke a new piece of her heart. The seasoned housekeeper released a profound, heavy sigh that echoed softly in the cavernous hallway. Betty had dedicated many years of her life to working in this Greenwich mansion and knew every invisible, aching fracture within this broken family. She intimately understood the deep loneliness deliberately hidden inside ridiculously expensive toys, the profound sadness guarded within the shining corridors, and the crushing absence cleverly disguised as financial security. "Your father works incredibly hard, my sweet angel, but he simply never seems to finish his work," Betty murmured gently, though she knew her words offered little real comfort. Betty simply stroked the little girl's soft hair with tender affection and guided her back toward the warm kitchen to enjoy a tall glass of milk and a generous slice of pound cake. Shortly after they sat down, the grand front doorbell chimed loudly, signaling the arrival of someone entirely new to their isolated world. Waiting quietly outside the massive double doors stood Claire, the newly hired maid sent by the local agency. She wore plain, modest clothing and carried a thoroughly worn canvas bag slung casually over her left shoulder. Her dark, expressive eyes clearly displayed the heavy weight of exhaustion, but they also held a magnificent, unwavering calm characteristic of those who completely embrace life's struggles before even stepping onto the battlefield. "Good morning, my name is Claire, and I am here for the open position," she announced softly but confidently. Betty immediately ushered her inside with a welcoming nod. "Come in, my dear," Betty said warmly. "This house is exceptionally large and demanding, but with a healthy dose of patience, you will learn the ropes soon enough." Claire stepped into the grand foyer, observing the space, without a single ounce of envy. She silently admired the glittering crystal chandeliers, the imported Italian marble floors, and the impossibly high ceilings. All of this immense wealth was undeniably impressive, but it absolutely failed to intimidate her spirit. Claire had already faced down personal hardships and quiet tragedies far greater than the daunting task of scrubbing the floors of a wealthy businessman's sprawling estate. Betty efficiently explained the strict daily routine, thoroughly demonstrated the array of specialized cleaning products, and officially introduced little Sophie. The young girl was quietly observing every single movement from the safety of the kitchen doorway. "Hello there, little one. What might your name be?" Claire asked, crouching down to her eye level. "Sophie," the child whispered shyly. "What an absolutely beautiful name!" Claire exclaimed with a genuine bright smile. "It actually sounds exactly like a piece of music." Sophie curiously tilted her head to the side, her interest suddenly piqued. "A name can sing?" the little girl asked, utterly confused by the strange concept. Claire's smile softened with profound warmth. "Certain names definitely sing a beautiful melody whenever someone pronounces them with true tenderness and love," Claire explained gently. The little girl did not offer a verbal response to this poetic thought, but her bright eyes widened. She carefully stored that comforting sentence deep inside her heart, holding onto it just as fiercely as one might guard a precious, unexpected gift. Over the following days, Claire seamlessly blended into the background, executing her demanding duties in near absolute silence. She meticulously dusted the vast guest bedrooms, efficiently organized the cavernous laundry area, mopped the seemingly endless polished corridors, and actively avoided causing any disruption. Yet the longer she navigated the quiet corners of the massive mansion, the more clearly she understood the root of its lingering sorrow. The profound sadness permeating the air did not originate from a lack of beautiful, expensive things. It stemmed entirely from a devastating lack of human presence. Carter was barely ever physically present at the house, usually trapped in the sprawling concrete jungle of the city. Whenever he did manage to return to Greenwich, his mind remained entirely distant, lost in a swirling sea of endless corporate obligations. Sophie constantly waited for him during the late afternoon hours, pacing nervously near the heavy oak door of his private study. Sometimes she would quietly repeat a rehearsed sentence, clutch a favorite plush toy tightly to her chest, or invent an entirely new imaginative story to share with him. But Carter would always wave her away endlessly, repeating the exact same hollow promise, "Tomorrow, we will do it later." Tragically, that promised tomorrow stubbornly refused to ever arrive. On a particularly gloomy, rain-swept Tuesday afternoon, Claire discovered Sophie lying flat on her stomach across the expensive Persian rug in the main living room. The little girl was completely surrounded by dozens of pristine porcelain dolls, shiny remote-controlled cars, elaborate board games, and brightly illustrated storybooks scattered in every direction. Despite the mountain of entertainment, the young girl was absolutely not playing with a single item. She was simply tracing her tiny index finger slowly over the surface of the rejected crayon drawing, which had been sharply folded into 4 neat sections. "Are you feeling sad today, Sophie?" Claire asked, her voice a gentle whisper, barely rising above the rhythmic drumming of the rain against the tall glass windows. The little girl simply shrugged her small shoulders in response. "I have plenty of expensive toys," Sophie replied quietly. "A child who has a whole room full of brand-new toys isn't supposed to be sad, right? Claire felt a sudden sharp ache grip her chest tightly. Without caring about her pending chores or the strict schedule, she immediately sat cross-legged on the floor right beside the lonely child. Yes, she absolutely can be, Claire answered with gentle honesty. A shiny toy only provides company for a very short amount of time, but the absence of a person you love aches for a very, very long time. Sophie lifted her head, looking intently at the maid with wide, curious eyes. No adult in this massive house had ever spoken to her with such raw, unfiltered honesty before. When I was a little girl, Claire continued, softly staring thoughtfully at the rain sliding down the glass, my mother used to sing whenever nostalgia and sadness made my heart hurt. She always said that while a melody cannot magically fix everything, it definitely helps a heavy heart remember how to breathe. Sophie leaned closer, thoroughly captivated by the story. Do you know how to sing? She asked. A brief, melancholic silence flashed quickly through Claire's tired eyes. She knew how to sing far better than she was ever willing to openly admit to strangers. Long before she resorted to scrubbing the floors of wealthy homes, long before she obsessively counted pennies at the end of every exhausting month, she had joyfully sung at local town festivals, tiny neighborhood churches, and warmly lit diners. Music had genuinely been her designated place in the vast world. But then harsh reality ruthlessly demanded the immediate payment of overdue utility bills, expensive medical prescriptions, mounting rent, and the immense responsibility of raising a daughter all on her own. Her beloved acoustic guitar had been sorrowfully packed away and forgotten in a dark closet. Consequently, her vibrant voice had slowly faded away, locked silently behind tightly sealed lips. Will you sing a song just for me? Sophie pleaded softly. Claire hesitated for a brief moment, but the child's desperate request was so incredibly pure that she simply could not find it in her heart to refuse. She began singing at a very low volume, making the melody sound almost exactly like a sacred, desperate prayer, echoing in a vast cathedral. She sang a beautiful, haunting tale about a tiny lost star, desperately searching across the dark midnight sky for a single lighted window where it could finally rest. Claire's voice was remarkably smooth, surprisingly steady, and absolutely overflowing with raw, unfiltered emotion. Sophie slowly sat upright, completely mesmerized, her large eyes wide open in absolute wonder as the notes floated through the chilly room. When the final delicate note completely faded into the silence, the cavernous living room suddenly felt significantly less cold and empty. Play another one, Sophie demanded, letting out a bright, genuine burst of laughter. Just one more quick song, and then you must go eat your lunch. Claire compromised with a warm smile. On that rainy afternoon, an incredibly special, entirely secret club was officially born. The very next morning, Claire brought an antique acoustic guitar hidden safely inside a thoroughly battered and deeply scratched leather case. She patiently waited until Carter's black car rolled out of the heavy iron gates, quickly rushed through her primary dusting tasks, and hurried up the grand staircase. The little girl was already sitting patiently beside the large bay window, watching the damp garden with eager anticipation. I brought something incredibly special to show you today, Claire announced, carefully laying the heavy leather case on the carpet. When Claire unlatched the ancient clasps and opened the lid, Sophie immediately brought both of her tiny hands up to cover her shocked face. It looks completely magical, the child whispered in awe. It is a guitar, Claire explained, and it keeps hundreds of hidden stories securely wrapped inside its silver strings. Claire patiently taught the eager little girl exactly how to press down and pluck a single simple note. Sophie pressed incorrectly, laughed loudly at the strange buzzing sound, and bravely tried the motion all over again. The resulting chord emerged completely distorted and awkward, but to Sophie's tiny ears, It sounded like the most spectacular symphony ever composed in the history of the world. Soon after, those clumsy notes evolved into short, joyful melodies, awkward clapping rhythms, and utterly nonsensical lyrics invented right on the spot. Claire masterfully transformed every single musical mistake into a fascinating lesson, celebrating every single clumsy attempt as a monumental victory. Sophie, who had previously tiptoed through the house like a silent ghost, suddenly began singing at the top of her lungs across the grand hallways. Betty, the observant housekeeper, was naturally the first person to notice this incredible transformation. She stopped dead in her tracks near the main corridor upon hearing the beautiful mixture of a child's gleeful singing accompanied by the rich strumming of a wooden guitar. Peeking cautiously through the cracked door, she witnessed Sophie smiling in a radiant, unburdened way she had not seen in countless heartbreaking years. Claire pressed a single finger to her lips, silently begging for secrecy, and Betty just wept happy tears as she returned to the kitchen. As several weeks melted away, the secret morning music club transformed into the hidden beating heart of the sprawling Greenwich mansion. Every single morning, the exact second Carter's vehicle disappeared down the long driveway, Sophie eagerly awaited Claire's magical arrival. She excitedly learned countless new tunes about blooming spring flowers, brave little birds learning to fly, and the quiet courage needed to face the dark. Sophie spent hours diligently drawing imaginary admission tickets for a spectacular concert, carefully taping the colorful paper squares directly onto her bedroom wall. Right in the dead center of this colorful masterpiece, she boldly wrote, with a thick black marker, "Daddy will definitely watch my show." Claire read those optimistic, innocent words and immediately felt a cold shiver of absolute terror run down her spine. Claire understood perfectly well that the fragile promises of innocent children frequently shattered when they relied heavily upon chronically busy, absent-minded adults. But on one particular Friday afternoon, something completely unexpected threw their hidden routine into total chaos. A massive corporate merger meeting was abruptly canceled at the last minute, forcing Carter to return to the quiet Connecticut estate in the middle of the afternoon. He barged through the front doors without offering any warning, angrily ripping off his expensive tailored suit jacket, still visibly furious over the failed financial negotiation. It was then that he abruptly paused. He clearly heard music filtering through the quiet house. It certainly was not the pristine digital sound of his expensive stereo system. This music was wonderfully alive, undeniably close, and beautifully imperfect. Carter slowly climbed the grand sweeping staircase, his expensive leather shoes making absolutely no sound on the plush runner, and stopped completely paralyzed outside the slightly open bedroom door. Inside the brightly lit room, Claire was sitting cross-legged on the floor, gently strumming the old wooden guitar. Sophie, wearing her favorite yellow dress, was passionately singing while clutching a plastic hairbrush like a professional microphone. Her bright eyes sparkled with undeniable joy, and her entire face was illuminated by a massive, unrestrained smile. Carter stood completely frozen in the doorway, unable to draw a single breath. For the absolute first time in his chaotic life, he truly saw his daughter not as a heavy obligation or a pending task, but as a brilliant, living child. A sharp, agonizing realization pierced straight through his chest. He finally understood that this overwhelming happiness existed entirely without him, and absolutely not because of him. The sudden loud thud of his heavy leather briefcase slipping from his relaxed grip and hitting the hardwood floor abruptly interrupted the joyful melody. Claire immediately snapped her head up, her eyes wide with absolute panic, bracing for immediate termination. Sophie spun around her face instantly, lighting up with immediate uncontainable joy, acting precisely as if this sudden interruption was the greatest birthday gift imaginable. "Daddy, you came home incredibly early today," she cheered loudly. I was just practicing my singing. Do you want to see Aunt Claire? Says my singing voice sounds exactly like a brave little bird that is finally learning how to fly high into the sky. Carter stood completely speechless in the doorway, his throat suddenly feeling as though it were tightly sealed shut. He stared blankly at his precious daughter, taking in her massive, genuine smile, the weathered wooden guitar resting comfortably on his maid's lap, and the colorful crayon drawings proudly plastered across the expensive wallpaper. On one specific drawing, Sophie had carefully painted 3 distinct figures sitting comfortably on the grass. Claire was depicted holding the large wooden guitar Sophie was shown singing with her mouth wide open, and Carter was drawn standing right beside them, wearing a black business suit but sporting a massive, happy smile. Directly underneath the drawing, written in clumsy, uneven letters, read the words, "My big, spectacular show with Daddy." Claire scrambled to her feet so quickly she nearly tripped over the carpet. "Mr. Carter, please forgive me. I absolutely should never have brought my personal instrument into your home without securing your explicit permission." "First," Claire stammered, her voice trembling slightly, "my only intention was to bring a little bit of comfort. I never meant to disrupt the strict routine of your household." Before Carter could respond, Sophie rushed forward and desperately grabbed his large hand. "Please do not fire Aunt Claire and send her away. Daddy," the little girl begged, her voice cracking with sudden panic. "She was only teaching me how to make beautiful music. I promise I did not make a huge mess or break any of the house rules." That single, terrified sentence wounded Carter far more deeply than any harsh corporate accusation ever could. His very own little girl already fully expected to lose something incredibly wonderful. At such a tender age, she was already intimately familiar with the devastating sensation of watching a vital door slam permanently shut in her face. Carter took a long, shaky breath, fighting back the strange moisture gathering in his eyes, and finally stepped directly into the center of the brightly lit bedroom. "Sophie, please go downstairs and drink a tall glass of cold water with Betty. For just 1 minute," he instructed softly. "I really need to have a private conversation with Claire." The little girl's lower lip trembled. "But did I do something terribly wrong?" she asked softly. "No, my sweet princess, you did absolutely nothing wrong at all," he assured her, offering a rare, gentle smile. Sophie obediently shuffled out of the room frequently, glancing over her tiny shoulder as if she were deeply terrified of completely abandoning a buried treasure. When Carter was finally left entirely alone with Claire, he slowly walked over to the large bay window. Gazing outside, the perfectly manicured, incredibly expensive gardens suddenly appeared utterly empty, completely devoid of any real life or profound meaning. "Exactly how long has this secret music club been going on?" Carter asked quietly, not turning around to face her. "About 2 weeks, sir, perhaps a little bit longer than that," Claire replied honestly, wringing her hands nervously. "It only started because Sophie was feeling incredibly sad and lonely." Carter squeezed his eyes shut tightly. Sad. The simple word crashed into his chest, like a judge's heavy gavel delivering a final, inescapable sentence. He brilliantly managed thousands of employees, effortlessly memorized complex global market reports, and successfully predicted massive financial crises before they ever happened. Yet he had completely failed to notice the crushing, suffocating sadness slowly consuming his own child right inside his own living room. "Are you a professionally trained music teacher?" Carter asked, finally turning around to face the nervous woman standing by the bed. Claire bashfully lowered her gaze toward the scuffed wooden floorboards. "Not in any official capacity, sir. I used to sing quite a bit in the past. I played my guitar in small neighborhood venues and local diners, but eventually I had to choose a steady, reliable job. I have a daughter, Ivy, who currently lives far away with my mother, Mary, in a quiet, rural town." Claire took a breath and continued, I send nearly all my earnings back to them so Ivy can afford a proper education and a safe home. Simply playing the guitar and singing local gigs just didn't pay enough to cover all the rising bills. Carter slowly turned fully toward her truly seeing Claire for the very first time. She was not just a maid in a uniform. She was a deeply loving mother who quietly carried her own heavy burdens and silent losses. You willingly stay miles away from your own daughter just to clean my floors and look after my massive house, he observed softly. I stay far away to guarantee that she has the stable, secure life that I never had the privilege to enjoy, Claire replied. Her steady response carried absolutely no bitter resentment. It only possessed quiet, unbreakable dignity. Carter felt a wave of profound, suffocating shame wash entirely over him. He physically lived inside the exact same house as Sophie, sleeping merely a few rooms away, and yet he was completely emotionally absent from her entire existence. Claire, on the other hand, was physically separated from her own child by cruel financial necessity, yet she somehow miraculously found the incredible strength to offer genuine warmth and presence to someone else's lonely daughter. Sophie clearly loves you very much, Carter stated quietly, his voice thick with unexpressed emotion. I love her dearly too, sir, Claire responded carefully. But I perfectly understand my position as an employee here. If it makes you uncomfortable, I swear I will never bring the guitar into this house ever again. Carter shook his head immediately. No, he commanded softly, startling the anxious maid. Claire tentatively raised her dark eyes to meet his gaze. Please, do not stop playing, Carter pleaded, his voice breaking slightly. For the first time in years, I saw my daughter genuinely, completely happy. I absolutely refuse to be the person who tears that beautiful joy away from her. Just then, the heavy wooden door creaked open a few inches, and a tiny face peeked inside. Sophie slowly crept back into the bedroom, with Betty the housekeeper nervously hovering right behind her in the hallway, both of them terribly failing at pretending they hadn't been eavesdropping. Carter deliberately dropped down onto his knees, directly on the carpet, an incredibly rare, vulnerable gesture that caused the little girl's eyes to widen in pure shock. Do you truly want to keep learning how to play the guitar and sing? He asked gently. I want to do it more than anything else in the whole wide world, Sophie whispered enthusiastically. Then you will absolutely continue, Carter promised firmly, but only under one very strict condition. Sophie nervously held her breath, terrified of the impending rule. I want to sit and watch the show whenever I possibly can, he finished. The brilliant smile that erupted on the little girl's face completely illuminated the entire room. But you have to sit flat on the floor, Daddy. That is the strict club rule, she giggled. Carter let out a real booming laugh. Then I suppose I will happily learn to follow the rules. On that miraculous afternoon, for the absolute first time in countless years, Carter actually stayed home. He did not sign a single corporate document, he entirely ignored his incessantly buzzing phone, and he absolutely refused to rush back to the chaotic city. He sat comfortably on the soft rug right beside his beaming daughter, while Claire masterfully strummed a beautiful, simple, and uplifting melody. Sophie sang with noticeable hesitation at the very beginning, but soon her voice swelled with magnificent courage. When she proudly finished the final verse, she enthusiastically clapped for herself and immediately grabbed Carter's large hand. Now, Daddy, you have to formally say thank you to the music, she instructed seriously. Thank you, music, Carter repeated awkwardly, feeling completely out of his depth. Sophie giggled loudly. Not like that. You have to say thank you using your heart. Carter truly did not know how to accomplish such a vulnerable task. He had spent his entire adult life aggressively protecting his heart, treating any display of emotion as a fatal weakness in the cutthroat business world. But looking deeply into Sophie's hopeful eyes, he genuinely tried. "Thank you for patiently waiting for me to wake up, Princess," he whispered softly. Sophie instantly threw her small arms tightly around his neck. Claire respectfully turned her head away to avoid intruding on the incredibly private healing moment, while Betty openly wept silent tears of pure joy while standing firmly in the doorway. Following that monumental day, the massive estate began to slowly, irreversibly transform. Carter did not magically become an entirely flawless man overnight, but he fiercely battled his deeply ingrained workaholic habits every single day. He permanently canceled trivial dinner parties, drastically reduced his exhausting international business trips, and intentionally left his silver phone locked inside his briefcase during breakfast. Initially, Sophie found this sudden change incredibly strange. She innocently asked if he had caught a terrible fever, if the wealthy company had tragically gone bankrupt, or if someone was forcing him to stay home. Carter always delivered the exact same honest answer: "I simply choose to stay here with you." The morning music lessons evolved into a beautiful afternoon tradition. Claire now played openly, officially granted full permission to fill the home with joyous sound. She patiently taught Sophie how to breathe deeply, how to listen carefully to the rhythm, and how to bravely try again after missing a note. Carter joined them on the carpet whenever he possibly could. Sometimes he arrived utterly exhausted, his forehead deeply lined with corporate stress, but merely hearing his daughter's cheerful singing instantly made the heavy world shrink to a manageable size. One evening, after a particularly loud and joyful lesson, Sophie curiously asked about Claire's daughter Ivy. Claire softly explained that the little girl was 9 years old, deeply loved playing the violin, and lived very far away because difficult circumstances demanded painful sacrifices. Sophie looked completely puzzled by this explanation. "Doesn't she miss you terribly every single day?" Sophie asked. "Then you should just bring her to live here with us." Claire smiled a heartbreakingly sad smile. "It just isn't that simple, my sweet love." Carter had been quietly listening from the hallway, and those innocent words echoed loudly in his mind for the entire night. The following morning, he invited Claire to sit down in the formal living room. "I spent all night thinking about what Sophie suggested," he began. Claire instantly tensed up. "Mr. Carter, she is merely an innocent child. She does not understand the immense financial burden of such things, but I absolutely do." Carter raised his hand gently to stop her. "I want to officially hire you as Sophie's full-time music tutor with a generous fair salary, a significantly reduced work schedule, and a comfortable home in the empty guest cottage on the property. If you accept Ivy, and Mary can move here immediately." Claire covered her trembling mouth with both hands. "I cannot possibly accept something so massive and generous," she cried softly. "You absolutely can," Carter insisted, his voice thick with deep gratitude. "You return the light and joy to my precious daughter's life. Please allow me the immense honor of helping you completely restore yours." The heavy tears flowed freely before Claire could even form a proper verbal response. For so many agonizing years, she had trained herself to remain fiercely strong and silent. Now, someone was finally offering her the beautiful, priceless chance to be a present, active mother once again. "I accept," she whispered through her joyful tears, "but I fiercely insist on working hard to truly earn my keep." Carter smiled warmly. "You already have." When Sophie finally heard the spectacular news, she sprinted wildly through the massive corridors, screaming at the top of her lungs that she was getting a brand new best friend. Betty spent the entire afternoon baking an enormous, glorious chocolate cake to celebrate the occasion. Carter personally handled the complicated logistics of the local school enrollment, the bedroom furniture, and the safe transportation without ever turning his generous gesture into a boastful spectacle. A few days later, Ivy finally arrived alongside her gentle grandmother, Mary. Ivy was a wonderfully shy little girl, with large, incredibly observant eyes, fiercely clutching a scuffed wooden violin case tightly to her chest. Sophie immediately welcomed her as if they had been the closest of sisters for their entire lives. "Do you want to sing a song with me right now?" Sophie asked excitedly. Ivy looked nervously up at Claire, who nodded encouragingly, and then offered a bright, shy smile. "I would love to," Ivy replied softly. That very evening, the grand Greenwich mansion overflowed with beautiful, chaotic music until very late into the night. It was absolutely far from a perfect professional performance. There were plenty of sharply missed notes, bursts of uncontrollable giggling, completely mismatched harmonies, and dirty dessert plates forgotten on the expensive coffee table. Yet as Carter sat comfortably on the floor, listening to Oliver, the gardener enthusiastically clapping along from the porch, and Mrs. Higgins the cook humming from the kitchen, it profoundly felt like the very first time his massive house actually remembered how to breathe. He watched Sophie leaning happily against Ivy Claire, masterfully tuning the guitar, Betty cheerfully singing off-key, and elderly Mary tapping her worn shoes completely out of rhythm. In that beautiful, chaotic moment, he deeply understood that a true family is not strictly defined by those who share the same bloodline. It is beautifully forged by those who deliberately choose to stay close when someone desperately needs to be seen and loved. This newfound peace would soon be tested when a serious message arrived from Penelope, his estranged ex-wife, demanding an immediate meeting regarding Sophie's future. However, instead of running away into his work, Carter faced Penelope with calm, unwavering confidence. Penelope arrived fully expecting to find the cold, distant man she had divorced, but instead, she found a fiercely present, loving father, surrounded by a noisy, vibrant, and utterly joyous household. The conversation was undeniably difficult, but it concluded peacefully with Penelope agreeing to visit regularly and respecting the beautiful new harmony Carter had built. As the years rolled gently by, the once silent mansion blossomed into a vibrant sanctuary of shared melodies and unwavering warmth. Carter learned a profound lesson that reshaped the remainder of his days, a truth that echoed deeply within the hearts of everyone who walked through those grand doors. Life frequently deceives us into believing that providing material comfort is the absolute ultimate expression of affection. We chase endless horizons, accumulating vast fortunes, utterly convinced that a heavier bank account will somehow construct an impenetrable fortress of security around those we hold dear. Yet as the fleeting seasons slip through our tired and grasping fingers, we slowly discover a magnificent truth hidden in the quiet, dusty corners of our busy lives. The single most valuable currency we can ever possibly offer our loved ones is never gold nor sprawling estates, but the undeniable grounding weight of our undivided presence. A child does not remember the expensive price tag attached to a forgotten toy, but they will forever cherish the simple afternoon you willingly sat on the floor and genuinely listened to their clumsy off-key songs. Time remains the only precious resource we can absolutely never earn back once it is spent. True enduring wealth is ultimately found in shared bursts of laughter in quiet and lingering conversations, and in the profound courage to pause our relentless, blinding ambitions just to truly witness the beautiful lives blooming right in front of us. When we finally choose to be completely present, we realize that genuine love requires no grand, expensive stage, only an open, patient heart completely willing to stay.